I supported my boyfriend through years of depression, unemployment, and rock bottom. Then I lost my job, and he told me I was too much. I didn't yell. I just walked out. A week later, he called crying. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. "You're just too much lately." It wasn't a yell, not even a raised voice. Just a murmur, low and detached, while he stood barefoot in the kitchen, holding a half-empty glass of water. Like that sentence hadn't just snapped something inside me clean in half. I didn't say anything right away. He leaned against the counter like he was tired. I just told him I lost my job 20 minutes earlier. Paula had called me into a meeting at 4:30 p.m., said all the right things about restructuring, told me it wasn't personal, then handed me a branded envelope with a final paycheck and a list of resources I'd never use. I came home in a daze. Damien was sitting on the couch when I walked in. I told him softly, "No theatrics, no panic, just, I got laid off today." He blinked, nodded, said, "Damn, that sucks." I waited for more. For the part where he asked how I was doing. Where he stood up, held me, told me we'd figure it out. The part I'd done for him so many times I couldn't even count. It didn't come. Instead, he got up, wandered into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter like nothing had shifted. Then he said it. "You're just too much lately." He looked tired when he said it. Like I was something heavy he'd been carrying too long. Like now that I'd fallen, he didn't have the energy to pretend. I looked at him, really looked. This man I'd cooked for, covered for, encouraged through 2 years of darkness. This man who once cried in my lap because he thought he'd never be okay again, and I stayed. I stayed when he didn't work, when he couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of him felt like a second job I never applied for. And now here we were, me jobless for less than 1 day. And already I was too much. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag, moved calmly, deliberately. Phone charger, 2 changes of clothes, toothbrush, laptop. No drama. He watched me from the kitchen, said nothing. When I zipped the bag, I left a note on the table. Just 6 words. "Thank you for confirming I'm done." And then I walked out. Into the evening air. Into the uncertainty. Into myself. The phone rang a week later. I saw his name. I let it ring. He didn't always used to be like that. There was a time when Damien couldn't get out of bed. When brushing his teeth was a win. When sunlight through the blinds made him flinch. He'd sit on the edge of the mattress, shoulders hunched, eyes vacant. I remember thinking depression didn't look like sadness, it looked like absence. Like someone had turned the volume down on his life until he was just barely there. I carried us. Paid rent, covered groceries, answered emails for him when he couldn't, took the car for oil changes, did the dishes, took over the laundry, refilled his prescriptions when he forgot, talked to his parents for him when he didn't want to explain. I didn't keep a tally. I wasn't waiting for a thank you, I just did it, because I loved him. Because he needed me, because I told myself that was what love looked like, being the stronger one when the other couldn't stand. He'd have good days sometimes. He'd take a shower, walk to the corner store with me, make a frozen pizza and beam like he'd cooked a 3-course meal. And I'd celebrate those wins like they were ours. Because they were. His rock bottom didn't just belong to him. It belonged to both of us. It shaped our routines, our silences, the entire temperature of the house. There was no part of me that lived outside of his pain. I used to think that was devotion. Now I know it was erasure. There were nights I sat in the bathroom, lid down on the toilet, just breathing. No crying. No texting Arya. Just sitting with the weight of all the things I couldn't say because I didn't want to tip him over the edge. I told myself it would pass, that he'd get better. And when he did, we'd be stronger, because I'd stayed, because I'd believed. But I didn't factor in what happens when the roles reverse, when the strong one stumbles, when the one holding it together can't anymore. And when that moment came, when I needed just a fraction of the care I'd given, he looked at me like I was a burden. And that, more than anything, is what broke me. The worst night wasn't loud. No yelling, no breaking things, no scene. Just the bathroom light leaking under the door and silence thick enough to choke on. I found him curled on the tile at 2 a.m. I only noticed because I woke up and the bed was empty. I thought he'd gone for a glass of water. Maybe stepped outside. Then I saw the light. The door was cracked just an inch. enough to see him sitting there, knees pulled to his chest, hands over his face, shoulders shaking. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask if he was okay. We were long past that. I just sat down. Right outside the door at first, back to the wall. Quiet. Eventually, I pushed it open and joined him. He didn't look up. I sat next to him, legs folded, palms flat on the cold tile. It smelled like toothpaste and the faint mildew from a towel that needed washing. The mirror was fogged from a shower he hadn't taken. I reached for his hand. He let me hold it. We stayed that way for hours, not talking, not fixing. Just breathing. His hand trembled in mine. I kept it steady. There was a moment, maybe 4 a.m., maybe later, when he finally rested his head on my shoulder. Said nothing. Didn't cry anymore. Just leaned into me like I was the only solid thing left. And maybe I was. I remember thinking, this is what love is. Sitting on cold tile in the middle of the night, holding a man who can't hold himself. I believed that. I believed it when I went to work the next morning, eyes puffy, stomach empty, heart stretched thin. I believed it every time I softened my tone so I wouldn't make things worse. I believed it when I told his mom he was just going through something to spare him the shame. I gave everything I had to make that moment easier for him. And all I ever wanted, quietly, was to know that if I ever hit the floor like that, he'd sit beside me too. It was months ago, maybe longer, when Arya asked me the question that wouldn't leave. We were on her balcony, sipping lukewarm wine out of mismatched mugs, the city humming beneath us. Damien had just canceled dinner plans for the third time that month, said he wasn't up for it, said he was tired, said he'd try next time. Arya looked at me with that blunt steadiness she always carries. Not judgmental, just honest. She said, what would he do if the roles reversed? I laughed, light, dismissive, said something like, he'd show up, he loves me. She didn't argue, just raised one eyebrow and sipped her wine. And then, are you sure? I paused, but only for a second, just long enough for her to know she'd hit something. Then I changed the subject, asked about her work, her sister, anything to shift the spotlight off the crack I didn't want to examine. But the question lodged in my brain like a splinter. What would he do? If I were the one unraveling, if I couldn't get out of bed, if I lost my job, if I stopped being the steady one, would he bring me tea in the morning? Would he cook dinner unprompted? Would he ask how I was doing and wait for the real answer? Would he hold my hand on the bathroom floor? I didn't want to admit I wasn't sure. I had built our relationship like a house, brick by brick, detail by detail, on the belief that I was safe inside it, that the care I gave would be there when I needed it. But Arya's question stayed. I carried it home, sat with it in the quiet, measured every interaction against it. And slowly, I started to notice the gaps. How he never asked about my work unless I brought it up. How he didn't say thank you when I made dinner, just assumed it. How he tuned out when I talked about stress, but lit up when I reassured him about his. I saw the imbalance. Not in explosions, in inches. Arya didn't push again, she didn't have to. Her question had already answered itself. The email came in at 8:04 a.m. subject line. Promotion decisions, Q3 update. Sender Paula Jensen. Tone, perfunctory, warm enough to feel fake, cold enough to feel final. I clicked it expecting what I already knew. Scan the names. Mine wasn't there. I stared at the screen a moment too long, not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. And that realization that I had stopped expecting anything good from people I gave everything to was its own kind of grief. I closed the email, got up, poured coffee, sat at the table. Quiet. Damien walked into the room 30 minutes later, hair messy, hoodie half-zipped. He grabbed a banana, sat down. You okay? He asked. I didn't get it. He blinked. Get what? The promotion. He nodded, chewing. That sucks. You'll bounce back though, you always do. I nodded too, like that was enough. Like you always do was comfort, not dismissal. He scrolled through his phone. Started telling me about some podcast he'd started. Something about dopamine and habits. I didn't follow. I just watched his mouth move and wondered if he noticed the difference in my voice. If he heard that it was flat. That it took effort to sound functional. He didn't. That afternoon, I worked late, cleaned up a report that someone else had botched, sent 3 emails for things that weren't mine to fix. Caught a glimpse of myself in the black screen of my monitor when it went idle and thought I looked tired. No hollow. When I got home, Damien was playing a game, headphones on. I dropped my bag louder than usual. He looked up, smiled. Hey babe, what's for dinner? Not how was your day? Not are you okay? Just the same rhythm we always followed. I made pasta, ate in silence. That night in bed, he fell asleep fast. He always did. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how often I gave things my full weight, and how often he floated just above responsibility. It wasn't the promotion that broke me. It was realizing I'd been demoted in my own life. It was a Thursday. Paula called me into a small conference room with no windows and too many chairs. She had a folder in front of her and a practiced look of sympathy. I knew the tone before she opened her mouth. It's not your performance, she said, just restructuring. I nodded, she kept talking, something about severance, health benefits, a contact in HR. I didn't absorb most of it. My ears were ringing, but my face didn't move. I smiled when she stood up to shake my hand. She looked relieved. Back at my desk, I packed in silence. Mouse pad, coffee mug. The notepad with a list I'd written that morning, things to finish, calls to return, reports to clean. All now irrelevant. I slid the contents into a tote bag I'd gotten at a networking event 2 years ago. The irony didn't even register. People avoided my eyes. A few said sorry to hear, like it was a traffic update. I walked out of the building and stood on the sidewalk. Watched the automatic doors close behind me. No badge. No re-entry. Just me and a bag of office supplies and the quiet shock of something that was always supposed to be stable, suddenly gone. I didn't cry. I took the train home, sat by the window, let the movement blur everything. A girl next to me was on a call complaining about her manager. I wanted to tell her to keep complaining, to fight, to expect more. Instead, I just listened. When I got home, Damien was on the couch watching TV. I said I lost my job. He blinked, damn, that sucks. That was it, not even a pause in the show. I went to the bedroom, changed out of my work clothes, folded them neatly, placed them back in the drawer. The drawer I wouldn't need anymore. The layoff wasn't personal, they always say that, but the silence in my apartment that night, that was personal. The next morning I woke up before him, out of habit. No alarm needed, just the internal clock that had been wired to get up, get dressed, check emails, prep breakfast, manage life. Only this time there was no email to check. No meetings, no commute, just me standing in the kitchen in the quiet. I made coffee, scrambled eggs, toasted bread. Damien wandered out around noon, scratching his neck, wearing the same hoodie from yesterday. He sat down, yawned. What's for lunch? Lunch, like breakfast, hadn't just happened. Like I hadn't lost the job that paid our rent, bought our groceries, kept the lights on. Like I wasn't spinning in my own mind, trying to figure out what day one of unemployed was supposed to feel like. I slid him a plate. He didn't say thank you. He scrolled on his phone while he ate, laughed once at something on Twitter, didn't ask how I slept, didn't ask what I needed, didn't ask anything. After he finished, he left his plate in the sink. I stood at the counter, sipping cold coffee, staring at the crust of toast left behind, and thought, he's still in the rhythm of being taken care of. He doesn't even know he never stopped being the dependent. During his lowest days, I adjusted to his slowness, his silence, his inability to show up. I learned how to carry the weight of two people and call it love. But now that I was the one who had fallen, there was no shift, no support, no mirrored effort. Just a man who'd gotten used to comfort, who'd mistaken my stability for something permanent and effortless. It hit me while I was rinsing his plate. He never considered what it cost me to keep this all afloat. He'd simply assumed I was built for it. And now that I wasn't, he was annoyed. The notice came in a plain envelope. No name, just Unit 3B scrawled on the front in Mr. Lane's tight handwriting. I found it slipped under the door late afternoon, folded once, unevenly. The kind of fold you make when you're trying not to think too hard about the person reading it. Rent due in 5 days. No partials, no extensions. I read it, then read it again. Folded it neatly and slid it into the drawer with the batteries and loose receipts. Next to the warranty we never mailed in and a takeout menu from a place that closed 2 years ago. I didn't panic. I just stood there, looking at the drawer, feeling the quiet weight of knowing I had always been the one to catch the deadlines before they became disasters. And now there was no paycheck to stretch, no cushion to pull from, no magic trick left to perform. Damien came into the kitchen an hour later, opened the fridge, closed it again. "Do we have anything to eat?" I didn't answer. He didn't ask about the envelope on the counter. Didn't notice the drawer I'd left slightly open. I wanted to ask him if he had ever looked at a rent notice and felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. If he knew what it felt like to be the last defense between comfort and chaos. But I didn't ask. Because I already knew the answer. Responsibility always found me. And Damien? He didn't even know what it looked like. It was late. Maybe midnight. The apartment was dim except for the soft glow of the TV, muted. Damien sat slouched on the couch, phone in hand, eyes flicking between reels of people living louder, more curated lives. I sat across from him, knees pulled up, blanket wrapped around me even though I wasn't cold. I said it gently, not like a fight, not like a plea, just the truth. "I'm scared." He didn't look up, I waited. "I don't know what I'm doing," I said. "I wake up with this knot in my chest and it's not going away. I don't feel okay." He finally glanced over, and then he sighed, not a deep, compassionate sigh, a tired one, a this again sigh. "You've been kind of intense lately." That was it, no reach for my hand. No talk to me. No what do you need? Just you've been kind of intense lately. I stared at him. I thought about every night I sat with him while he unraveled, every appointment I booked, every meal I made when he couldn't bring himself to eat, every bill I covered, every plan I postponed, every moment I shrank myself so he could have more room to break. And now here I was, tired, jobless, uncertain, asking finally for something simple, to be seen. And I was told I was too much, not directly, not cruelly, just enough to make me feel like even my pain had become an inconvenience. I didn't cry. I nodded, stood up, walked into the bathroom and stared at my own face in the mirror. I looked the same, but something in me had gone very, very quiet. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't throw clothes around or curse or cry or demand he explain himself again. I just packed, slowly, deliberately, one duffel bag, a pair of jeans, 2 t-shirts, a sweatshirt, underwear, toothbrush, laptop, charger, passport, not because I was going anywhere, but because it felt important to hold something that proved I existed. Damien was still in the living room, still scrolling, still pretending that everything would pass if he stayed still long enough. I wrote the note on a post-it, the same kind I used to leave on the fridge with grocery reminders. Milk, bread. Don't forget to eat today. This one said, "Thank you for confirming, I'm done." I stuck it to the inside of the front door, not dramatic, just visible enough. Then I picked up my bag, put on my shoes, and left. He didn't notice until the door closed behind me. Even then, he didn't call out, because he didn't believe I'd actually leave. Not me, the caretaker, the one who always made room, always came back, always bent before anything could break. He thought this was just a rough patch, that I'd sleep it off. Apologize, come home with takeout and a tight smile, but I didn't, because this wasn't a fight. It was a finish line, and I crossed it quietly. Arya didn't ask questions. When I showed up at her door with a bag slung over my shoulder and exhaustion written all over my face, she just opened the door wider and said, "Shoes off. Couch is made." I stepped inside, the lights were low. A blanket already folded neatly at one end of the sofa. A spare toothbrush in the bathroom, pajamas, hers, a size too big, already laid out in case I hadn't thought that far ahead. I hadn't. She handed me a glass of water, not wine. Not advice, just water. Like she knew what I actually needed was basic kindness. We didn't talk much that night. She sat next to me, legs pulled under her, the TV playing something forgettable in the background. Every few minutes she'd glance over like she was checking to make sure I hadn't disappeared. I didn't cry. I didn't unload everything in a dramatic monologue. I just sat. And for the first time in weeks, maybe longer, I didn't feel like I had to hold the room together. There was no one I needed to fix. No silence I had to fill. No expectation to explain how I got here. Arya passed me the remote without asking what I wanted to watch. We didn't watch anything. I lay down eventually. Pulled the blanket over me. stared at the ceiling, and let the stillness wrap around me like a language I used to speak fluently, back before I made my life revolve around someone else's needs. She left the hallway light on, just in case. I fell asleep fast, not because I felt safe exactly, but because for the first time in a long time I wasn't bracing for something, and that was enough. 7 days passed. No messages. No missed calls, no doorbell rings, just silence. And it didn't ache. It didn't echo, it just was. I woke up early most mornings, made coffee before Arya stirred. I didn't check my phone first thing. I let the notifications sit. Most were spam, a few were job alerts. I opened them slowly, bookmarked some, ignored others. By the third day, I'd updated my resume. By the fifth, I'd sent out 5 applications, cleaned up my LinkedIn, created a new Gmail account just for job stuff. It felt like planting seeds in dry soil, not sure what would grow, but still worth the try. Arya left me alone most of the day, checked in when I looked too still. "You good?" I always said, "I'm getting there." At night we ate together, not fancy meals. Toast, pasta, rice, and eggs, but it tasted like peace. We went for walks, short ones, around her block, past houses I didn't recognize. I stopped bringing my phone. I started writing in a notebook. Nothing profound, just pieces of thought. Things like, being needed isn't the same as being loved. Silence can be a sanctuary or a sentence. It took me longer to leave than it should have, but not a second longer than I had to. I didn't miss Damien. I missed the version of me I used to be before him, the one who had bandwidth, who had mornings to herself, who didn't brace for comments disguised as concern, who didn't carry someone else's entire sense of self on her back. 7 days, and every single one of them was lighter than the day before. The phone rang on the 8th day. His name lit up the screen like it used to. Familiar, heavy, irrelevant. I watched it ring from the couch. Didn't move. Arya glanced over from the kitchen. "You gonna get that?" I shook my head. It rang 4 times, then went silent. A minute later, the text came in. "Can we talk?" That was all, no apology, no context, no question mark. Just that strange half-request, half-command from a man who used to need me so badly he couldn't breathe without my calm. Now here he was, reaching, and I felt nothing. No anger, no curiosity, no need to clarify the ending. I locked the screen, set the phone face down. Arya walked over, dropped onto the couch beside me with 2 mugs of tea. She didn't ask what he said. She didn't need to. I sipped slowly. Because silence used to feel like punishment, a threat, a sign something was broken. But now, silence was mine, and letting it stretch between us wasn't cruel, it was honest. He had my number, he just didn't have access anymore. The apology came 2 days later. A long message, longer than I expected. The kind you send when you're hoping word count can make up for what never got said out loud. He opened with regret, said he hadn't handled things well, that he was scared. That when I lost my job, it triggered something in him, something about failure, his own shame, his own years of helplessness. He said he didn't realize how much I carried. Not until I was gone. He said I'd always been the strong one, and that he thought maybe I didn't need as much. That my calm had fooled him into thinking I was fine. Always fine. Unshakable, he wrote that he missed me, that the apartment felt cold, that he kept reaching for someone who wasn't there. He didn't ask me to come back, but it was implied. I read the message twice. Slowly. Every line packed with a version of him that only seems to exist when I'm already halfway out the door. And for a moment, I wanted to feel something. A flicker, a pull, a warmth, but I didn't. Because realizing you hurt someone doesn't mean you know how to love them. And missing someone isn't the same as making space for them while they were still around. He had found the words. Finally. But I had already stopped needing them. Self-awareness might be the beginning of growth, but it isn't repair. And some things don't get built back once they've been carried alone too long. I found the note in the side pocket of my duffel bag. The one I'd packed in silence in a room that used to feel like mine. It was bent now, soft at the edges, but the ink hadn't faded. "Thank you for confirming, I'm done." I read it once. Slowly. It didn't feel dramatic or angry. It felt accurate. It was the only sentence I could manage that night. No accusations, no edits, no appeal to be understood. And now, reading it again, it felt like closure I had written for myself without realizing that's what it was. Because there was nothing left to clarify. He had shown me who he was, not with one sentence, but over time, with every shrug, every deflection. Every moment I sat quietly beside him and hoped one day he'd notice the weight I was holding. And when I finally needed someone to do for me what I had done for him, he called it too much. This note wasn't just an exit, it was a mirror. It reminded me that I didn't leave on impulse. I left because something in me had shifted from hopeful to certain. Because staying isn't love when it costs you your self-respect. I folded the note, placed it back in the pocket, not because I needed to carry it forever, just long enough to remember that I never needed permission to walk away from what stopped being love and started being labor. The interview was across town. Nothing flashy, just a mid-size company with a decent reputation and a role that matched what I knew I could do. Nothing I had to fake. I wore the navy blazer Arya lent me, slightly tight in the shoulders, but it made me feel sharper. Like someone who didn't need to explain the gap on her resume. Like someone who didn't owe anyone a story, just her skills. I sat in the lobby 15 minutes early, legs crossed, breath steady. A woman named Maya from HR came out to greet me, firm handshake, warm eyes. She walked me through the office, small, clean, sunlit, no glass walls, no theater. We sat in a quiet conference room. She asked about my experience. I told her. Calm, straightforward, no overcompensating, no shrinking. Just the truth. She nodded a lot, took notes, asked smart follow-ups, listened when I answered. When she asked why I left my last role, I said, restructuring. Nothing more, it was enough. By the end, she smiled and said, "You're very clear." It hit me harder than I expected, because clarity was something I'd fought for, in my job, in my relationship, in myself. And here it was named and seen without me having to perform for it. I left the building into cool afternoon air. Texted Arya, went well. Think I actually want it. She replied, hell yes. I'm ordering pizza whether they hire you or not. I smiled. Walked a few blocks before catching the train home. It wasn't a comeback story. I wasn't reinvented. I was just moving forward on my own terms. The second call came 2 nights later. I was on the floor in Arya's living room, folding laundry, watching some crime doc we weren't really paying attention to. The phone lit up. Damien's name again. This time, he left a voicemail. I waited until the show ended before I played it. His voice was hoarse, slower than usual. I miss you, he said. I don't know who I am without you. I know I let you down. I didn't know how bad it was until you left. I'm sorry, I wish I'd seen it sooner. I wish I knew how to fix it. Then nothing, no breathing, just the soft click of an ending. I listened once. That was enough. And I felt it, the sadness in his voice, the hollow space I'd left, the pieces he was just now trying to hold in his hands. But I didn't feel pulled. Not because I didn't care. Because I'd finally learned the difference between caring and carrying. I used to believe love meant staying. That if someone was broken and you walked away, it meant you failed. That your job was to wait until they healed, even if they didn't ask you to. But love isn't endurance when it's one-sided. It's exhaustion. And now, I could hear his pain and not make it mine. I could feel the echo of who we were without reopening the door. I deleted the voicemail, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because someone else's reckoning isn't your responsibility when they only start looking inward after you're already gone. The call from Maya came on a Monday morning. Different Maya, the recruiter from the company with the sunlit office and the quiet conference room. Her voice was bright but not overeager, confident like she already knew my answer. We'd love to offer you the position, she said. Can you start next Monday? I didn't rush to answer, I let it land. I pictured the walk to that building. The way the office smelled like new paint and coffee. The woman who held the door open for me. The way no one asked for my story, just what I could do. Yes, I said. I'd love to. We went through the basics. Salary, start date. Paperwork, she said she'd send everything over in an email. I thanked her twice. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of Arya's bed, still holding the phone like it might say something else. It didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. It wasn't just a job offer, it was proof. That the world kept going, that there was life after him, that I was never actually too much. Arya poked her head into the room. Was that them? I nodded. Good news. They want me to start Monday. She walked in, handed me a piece of toast with butter already melting into the edges. You're gonna kill it, she said. No ceremony, no over-the-top reaction, just faith, just presence. I took a bite. It tasted like something solid. After everything, the silence, the slow unraveling, the exit I'd made without slamming the door, this was the moment I had waited for. Not validation. Not revenge. Just a beginning I didn't have to apologize for. The phone rang again that night. I was sitting on the floor, folding laundry. The last clean load I had before I'd need to go to the laundromat again. Arya was in the kitchen, humming something off-key while she washed dishes. The screen lit up. His name, again, I didn't even look twice. I let it ring. No pause in my folding, no hitch in my breath, no curiosity, no anger. Just another name on a screen I no longer felt tethered to. I folded a sweatshirt, set it aside, reached for a sock. The call went to voicemail. No buzz, no second try. It was strange how quiet it felt, how easy. There was a time when that sound, his name lighting up my phone, would have sent me spiraling, rehearsing what I'd say, replaying what he said last, wondering what he meant, what he wanted. If this was the moment, he'd finally get it. But I wasn't waiting for him to get it anymore, because nothing he could say now would make me question the silence I had fought so hard to claim. I finished folding the laundry, put the phone on the charger. Didn't check if he'd left another voicemail. Didn't need to, because when you've spent enough time carrying someone else's weight, peace doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like not caring who's calling. The birds woke me up before the alarm did. Soft, steady, a little out of sync. The kind of quiet noise that feels earned. I sat up in Arya's spare bed, just a mattress on a frame with no headboard, a mismatched nightstand, and the softest sheets I'd slept in for months. The apartment was still. I padded into the kitchen, made coffee without a second thought. No one else to ask. No one hovering behind me, waiting for something. I didn't have to be careful with my voice. I didn't have to plan the day around anyone else's mood. I didn't have to ration my energy like I might need it to calm someone else down later. I sipped my coffee slowly, barefoot on cold tile, the mug warm in both hands. No texts, no missed calls, no new voicemails, just me. For years, I'd been someone else's structure, their reassurance, their spine, their nurse, cheerleader, budget planner, emotional filter. And when I cracked just once, he called it too much. But this moment, this was nothing. No big win, no cinematic breakthrough, just coffee and birds and silence that didn't ask anything from me. It was everything. I didn't need to post about it. I didn't need to tell anyone I'd made it. I just knew I was done explaining myself to people who only loved me when I was useful. The job started in a week. I'd figure out the rest. Rent, furniture, groceries, I had time. And for the first time in a long time, that time belonged to me. No one asked me for anything that morning, and I owed no one an explanation, just breath, just peace, just mine. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.